Welcome everyone to East Rock Creek Village's Armchair Travel. We're going to the Galapagos Islands. We're revisiting them. It was one of our earliest armchair travel experiences with Peter Kramer, our neighbor, our friend, our ERCV board member, and biologist who lived and worked in the Galapagos Islands many times in his life and who's been visiting and took family and friends there very recently in last winter. And so we are really happy to be gathered to enjoy armchair travel on a rainy spring day. And I just want to thank everyone for being here, and we'll get started. Peter, you can introduce yourself just a little, and then I'm gonna spotlight you. And there, well, that's Peter, so everybody can see him.
Yeah,
just so you can find him.
Okay, thank you very much, Shelley, for the nice introduction. That's true. Diane was on Galapagos 3 times already. I was on Galapagos. I lived there, as you said, twice for years. And first time I went there 60 years ago, 60 years ago, and lived there for a year. And then I went back and lived there for 3.5 or almost 4 years, 50 years ago. And last time we were there is over Christmas and New Year's. The pictures that I'm going to show you and what I'm talking about is sort of a mix of several visits, obviously, but the pictures are the best pictures are not taken by me. I should say that very clearly. But I've got so many nice people around me who give me their best photographs, which is of course wonderful. So keep that in mind. Yeah, it's about 100 pictures. I'll run through them. If you have questions, please do ask in between. If you fall asleep, I don't see you. That's okay. Okay, here we go. Can you hear me all? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. You. Thank you. Here now, you see a map of the Galapagos Islands. It is, if you look at the small map at the upper right-hand corner, you can see the little red quadrangle out in the Pacific, straight west from Latin America. And you see where Ecuador is on the Latin American country, on the Latin American continent. It's one of the smaller countries. And but Galapagos is part of it. It's a province of the Republic of Ecuador, and about 600 miles straight left, straight west of Ecuador, with the equator going straight through the islands. You see the map. Oops, somehow one doesn't see the map entirely, but it doesn't matter. Sorry, doesn't matter. You can see the map, and you see larger islands on the left, and somewhat smaller islands to the more to the east and to the south. The biggest island, the long thing that looks like a little bit like a seahorse, is about 80 miles long. That gives you a rough idea of the size of the archipelago. You're talking about an archipelago that is on an area of about, well, something like 150 by 150 miles. It's all volcanic. The whole thing, the whole archipelago, like Hawaii, is created by volcanic activity. And some islands are older, meaning that they have been created by volcanic activities, maybe some hundreds of thousands or some millions of years ago. The ones in the west, on the bigger islands on the left, are younger, maybe a few 100,000 years old, and they are higher and they're active. They're active volcanoes with eruptions. Yeah, just about every year there is an eruption somewhere there. I'll talk to you about sort of the travel, but also about science a little bit. I want to tell you a bit of the work, the science work that is being done there and the conservation work that is being done there. Conservation is done mainly by the national park on the islands. National park organization, like in this country, takes care of large areas that are protected. And the Galapagos was the first Ecuadorian national park created a little bit more than 60 years ago, 65 years ago. And at the same time, a research station was set up, the Charles Darwin Foundation. The picture here shows one of the buildings. And the next one actually shows the whole complex of this institution. I will talk about that a little bit at the end, just to give you an idea of what sort of work many others, but to an extent I have done there. I was the director of that station 50 years ago for a few years. This is the Charles Darwin Foundation. In the background, you see a village, and at the end, after we have looked at some pictures of animals and plants, I would like to talk a bit about the people who live there. When you come to Galapagos on a boat, and you come, I should say, if and when you go, you would fly to Galapagos to one of the airports there. There are two. And from there, you would take a boat and travel around from one island to the other. What you would see is sites like this here, eroded islands, bigger or small, practically all of it dry, looking very inhospitable, which it is, gray, brown, rocky. And if you look overboard, you see a lot of wildlife in the water, like these dolphins here. This was on our last trip when a group of dolphins accompanied us. But you could also see jumping manta ray, like this beast here, jumping up and splashing back down on the surface of the ocean. You see storm petrels. You have these several species in all parts of the tropical oceans. There are two species on Galapagos. They're small. They look a little bit like a swallow, but they are not. They are strictly seabirds, practically almost always in the air. And then you go on land. You go on land, and in these rubber boats, very comfortable, everything. But yes, wet landing. But you're in the tropics, and it's beautiful sand, so it's very comfortable. And on land, you see these sea lions. Sea lions are a group of species that live in the Pacific, and you have them in California. If you go down the Californian coast on the Pacific, into Latin America, you have sea lions everywhere. And on the Galapagos, they also have these sea lions who are slightly different from the sea lions who live on the continental coasts. You look back on boats that take you around. And this one is a particularly large one. That's not the one that we went on. I'll show you a picture of one. But these we tourists go around on boats like this. This one has about 100 passengers, which is as big as they get on Galapagos. The smaller boats, like the one we were on, have 8 or 16 or 32 passengers. Most small ones have 16. The reason it's 16, 32, or 48 is that the national park prescribes that you must have a guide on board, a licensed national park guide, for every 16 passengers. So the boat construction has followed that rule and provides boats with 16 and generally a multiple of 16 passengers. In the background, you see one of those big volcanoes that you saw on the map in the west, about 4,500 feet high. You see the different grades of gray or brown or black on that flank. That is because there were eruptions, more recent or older, that produced lava that flowed down that flank. And the fresher it is, the darker it is. The lighter ones may be a few thousand years old, but as I said, there's an eruption somewhere there almost every year. On land, you have a mix of some sand and then volcanic rock. And you see all sorts of things, which I will show you, but staying with the volcanology, this is a picture of taken from the rim of the, what we would call the crater of the volcano. The volcanologists don't call that a crater, but a caldera. It's a caldera because it's not active anymore. It was the place where the eruption happened, but nowadays the eruptions don't happen there anymore, but on the rims. And then the lava generally, or often, or part of the lava flows into that caldera. And what you see here, this huge area of brown lava is the result of a eruption that happened 2 or 3 years ago. You get back on the boat and you're very well treated with hot cocoa, or if it's cool, which sometimes it is. Even you are on the equator, it's windy and it's nice, but it's not necessarily very hot. On the beach, you find things like this. You wonder what that is. Looks like a tractor or something going down or up the beach. This was up the beach. And you look more closely, you look downwards, and you see this thing here, a marine turtle that we saw sort of mid-morning heading towards the sea. It had gone up, slowly gone up the beach and may have laid eggs, probably not. It seems it was unsuccessful in that case. And then in the morning goes back into the sea. The same animal, you see them also in the water, taking this picture of one floating by our boat in the mangroves, actually. There are 2 species of marine turtles living on Galapagos. This green turtle is the most common. It's a species that exists in many parts of the tropical world, even on the, or subtropical, also in the Caribbean, in Florida, for example. It nests and lives. They have been reduced massively around the world because people eat them and eat their eggs. The Galapagos population is maybe the only one in the whole world that has not been reduced in numbers. People have been eating them, but not in large numbers, and now they are really strictly protected, and that is also enforced. You go along the beach and you see, you need to format what? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, something happened to touch something apparently. Anyway, here we go. You see on the beach, these little guys running around amid a sort of a tapestry of little bullets, little balls. These are ghost crabs who live in the sand, highly specialized beach dwellers. who live on what the high tide left behind when it goes back in the sand. What I mean is that when the sea comes up in the high tide and covers the sand, tiny stuff comes down on the sand, remains on the sand as the water retreats. Algae, little crustaceans, things that you don't see unless you look at it by microscope. They scoop it up. They scoop the surface of the sand up with their claws, put it in their mouth, filter it out, and spit out these little balls of sand that have been, so to speak, cleaned of their organic content. That's what they live on. And the surf comes up again, next tide, everything is covered again, and provides food for them again. While the surf is up, while the sea is up, they go into holes in the sand where they live. So in the beach, you see many holes, and they retreat. If you get too close, they run and hide in those holes in the beach. And it's not only the crabs who love the water, we do too. So if you are a tourist there, you can go swimming here and there, which is wonderful. It's tropical, but it's cool. The main reason it is relatively cool, even though we're on the equator, is that there is a deep current coming from the west, across the Pacific, deep. I'm talking thousands of feet deep, which hits the islands and comes up to the surface and provides cool water, which is not only cool, but also nutrient rich, which provides much of the food to much of the marine life in Galapagos. Is one reason also why there are many whales there, dolphins, and anything that, goes from seabirds to sea lions lives directly or indirectly on that productivity. The paths for tourists are marked. You see that little stake on the right, and everybody marches carefully, stays on those paths. You can take pictures of animals that are generally very, very tame, surprisingly tame. You ask yourself, why are they tame? Well, the fact is that before human beings came to Galapagos, only a couple of 100 years ago, and lived there constantly, there was no people there. Nobody lived there originally. It was not ever inhabited by aboriginals, as we might call them, the animals are not used to humans, which is wonderful, also dangerous for them because, of course, they're easy to kill. Sea lions everywhere on the beaches, resting between their outings to go for fish. They look dead, but they're not. They're sleeping. You can get very close, but you're not allowed to. The rule is don't get closer to any animals than 6 feet. From the beaches, you walk inland, and there often you see enormous expanses of lava, rocky lava. And you imagine, a shipwrecked person arriving there, it's hopeless, it's terrible. And most people who were shipwrecked on Galapagos died because they didn't find any water. Then you get to these places here, which looks wonderful because it's water, and it is water, but it's seawater. There's nothing you can, because it seeps in from the sea. There's no fresh water there. It may be even saltier than the sea because the water condenses and It's concentrated. And there's see sometimes these little things, you see things in these lagoons, and you wonder what it is. Looks like a piece of cake or something, but then you look again and it's flamingos. There are flamingos on Galapagos, a small population, which surprisingly is the same species that also lives in the Caribbean. Beautiful birds, a small population on Galapagos. You never see more than 6, 8, 20 in one place. They also breed in small groups. While, as you may have seen in pictures from other parts, particularly from Africa, sometimes you have colonies of thousands of flamingos in places. They feed on small organisms on the bottom of these lagoons. That's what they're doing here. You see other things walking around, swimming around, like this black-necked stilt, and on the right, a marine iguana. We'll talk about them more. The black-necked stilt here on the left is a migrant. We saw several of these in this winter. They breed in the north, in Canada, also in the United States, Alaska, and fly down to overwinter in the tropics. A small part of them also comes to Galapagos, most of them in other parts of Latin America. And then you see boobies. There are 3 species of boobies on Galapagos, like this Nazca booby, which is an endemic. Endemic means they exist only on Galapagos. They are not found anywhere else in the world. They're beautiful birds, nest on the ground, generally form pairs for life. Red-footed boobies. Here you see how tame they are. These guys nest on the ground. These red-footed boobies nest on bushes, like on these mangroves. And the third species that you see everywhere, that's the most common one actually, that sometimes you see in groups diving, hundreds of them diving into the sea, close to coast and hunting for fish. Excuse me, it's this blue-footed booby. Also a beautiful bird. And in the foreground, you see, again, a marine iguana. The marine iguanas you see just about everywhere on Galapagos, wherever there are rocks, you see marine iguanas. And you will see more in the coming pictures. Now, but back to this blue-footed booby, that's how he hunts. You saw this here before. Now here you see one diving into the sea. It goes so fast. He throws his wings back and really goes into the sea, like it looks like a jet engine or a jet plane, shooting into the sea and hunting for fish. He does that because he has seen the fish from higher up and goes after it in this way and comes back generally without having caught anything. But, every 10th time or something, he has one, and that's good enough. Blue-footed booby on the left again. And then there's a fabulous gull. You see it on the right hand, the lava gull. Again, an endemic. The blue-footed booby is not endemic, incidentally. It exists also in other parts of the world, but this lava gull exists only on Galapagos. It's very tame. And yeah, it's called lava gull because the color of its color. Yeah, it's one sitting, beautiful bird. Another gull, the swallow-tailed gull, also endemic, exists only on Galapagos. And when you go around in the day, you're lucky to see it flying because it generally doesn't fly much during the day. Why? It's nocturnal. It flies, it hunts during the night, which is amazing. It has large eyes, a gull that is night active. Why does it do that? Well, the answer is that in tropical oceans, probably also in other oceans, I'm not quite sure, there are animals who come to the surface during the night to feed there, because there is certain foods more available to little squids, for example. Therefore, they rise to the surface of the sea, and that's the time when they can be hunted. The gulls go after these little fish or squids, generally squids, who come to the surface of the ocean during the night. Oh, this beautiful tropic bird, he's not nocturnal, he's diurnal, day active, does not really nest in colonies, more isolated pairs here and there. Beautiful bird, not endemic, it exists also in other parts of the world. And the brown pelican, same species as in other parts of the Pacific coast, and on the, I think on the Atlantic coast, we also have brown pelicans. And then there's a very special bird, very endemic, meaning it's really special on Galapagos only. It's a cormorant. And you see it sitting around doing what all cormorants around the world do, drying its wings. And you look at those wings and you think, what? What are those? Well, they're tiny, and he doesn't fly. It's flightless. It's a flightless cormorant who is highly specialized hunting underwater and doesn't fly. Doesn't need to fly. It doesn't have to migrate anywhere else. Its food is always around, so it stays on Galapagos and lives in the western part of the islands, which is nutritious, rich, and produces the food that this bird needs. Another one drying its wings. It's a big bird. It's the biggest cormorant in the world. It can, so to speak, afford being large because it doesn't have to fly. That's how it swims on the water and underwater. As you see, it doesn't fly. The wings are close to its body. It propels itself with its feet. It has big feet, webbed feet, that helps it to really shoot through the water, amazingly. And then there's another one, another endemic, a penguin. Small penguin, the smallest in the world, and the only penguin who actually lives north of the equator. Part of the population does. It lives around the equator. As you certainly know, the penguins are strictly southern hemisphere birds, live mainly in Antarctica and on the ice around the Antarctica and the islands and continents of South Africa and South America. But in Galapagos, you have the Galapagos penguin, an endemic population of a few hundred birds, highly fragile, obviously. If anything is changed in the area of where it lives, it could easily become extinct. Here you have a little video of a group of these penguins hunting. You see, they disappear all at the same time, gone, up again, and then they go down all together, hunting apparently what must be under there, a group of fish.
My picture has been reduced. Is anybody else having that issue?
Sorry?
My picture has become very small.
Yvonne, if you can maybe go to the upper left corner, there might be some buttons that you could make it larger. But everyone else, I think, is still seeing it.
Okay, I'm sorry, but
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Keep trying. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Just to show you an interesting contrast to the cormorant, the penguin doesn't propel itself with its feet, it does it with its wings. And then you have these birds in the middle of, this was New Year's roughly, were whimbrel. Whimbrels are northern birds, and they come to Galapagos and in many other places in Latin America to overwinter. So on Galapagos, they never breed on Galapagos, but they are there in, say, from November to February or something. And another migrant who comes to Galapagos only during the winter, an osprey. You may have seen ospreys here. They live all over the northern hemisphere, but breed in the north, places like Siberia, Canada, North America in general, and Eurasia, further in the north, hunting fish, and but it migrates. In winter, it comes down into tropical areas. And this is the most, it's typical, if you wish, seabird on Galapagos that you see just about everywhere in the tropics, the frigate bird. Two species that are not so easy to tell apart. I won't talk about the two species. Beautiful birds sail above your boat. They have learned that, sometimes fishing boats throw something overboard, so they come and pick up whatever they can find. They are scavengers hunting for any organic matter on the surface of the sea. Well, I should say any animal organic matter. They don't eat algae, but dead fish, or they even catch in flight flying fish, but they stay strictly in the air. They never land on the water, never. They never touch the sea. They're always in the air, except when they sit down in a convenient place, like the top of the mast on your boat. They like places like that. And sometimes you see them flying around with this enormous bag or balloon. That's the male generally displaying when it's on the nest, but sometimes then it also flies off with it. Only the males showing off their balloons attract females with whom they produce one young, probably not every year. They grow old, so they reproduce slowly. They like to land on your boat. In this one, here's a male whose balloon has collapsed and it's resting on our boat. You can see it in the background there, and the photographer in the foreground, Diane, taking a picture of it. That's the way I took the pictures, It's about 6 feet away, not more. And the marine iguanas, incredible beasts. They look horrible, vicious, but they're totally, totally inoffensive. They move aside when you come, they don't do anything. So it's more you trying to avoid them. They certainly are not interested in you. They sort of look at you as a strange being. And they live in groups together, going into the sea when the tide is low and eat algae. They look as though they would sort of hunt for animals or something, but they don't. They are strictly vegetarian. They may here and there pick up a little crab or something by accident, but only by accident. They certainly don't go for it. They go for algae. And there's a little video that I'll show you. And this is a male. The males have this fantastic thing on their back. The females in the back are smaller. They lie around like this in groups during high tide. when they come out of the water to warm themselves and digest the algae they have eaten. They are highly specialized swimmers. They're not very fast, but they fly, they swim out maybe a few hundred yards and dive down to about 100 feet and eat algae on the rocks. Sometimes on the iguana, you have another little lizard sitting on it, to which I'll come in a moment. They cohabit with the sea lions. And here you see it. This is now not underwater, but this one is even eating the algae at low tide. You can see how it doesn't. You see the little crab, land crab, also on the side, which we will see more of. They're quite amazing animals, these marine iguanas. They are the only marine lizard in the world. Again, tame. They live partly in the villages. They live on, like close to this bicycle stand. They're everywhere at high tide when they rest.
Peter,
Yes.
on the picture with the sea lions, it was hard for me to see. I wonder if we could go back there. I was trying to get an idea of what the size of the iguanas was compared to the sea lions.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Look at these. You see the sea lion. The sea lion may be something like 6 or 8 feet long.
Mhm.
So these iguanas, they get up to 3 feet long, the biggest.
Mhm.
But these guys here, most of them are females. They're maybe 2 feet, 3 through 2.5 feet long. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Peter,
Sure.
you can use your cursor if you want to point out anything. I think we'll be able to see it if there's your little cursor.
Oh, you can see the cursor now, yeah?
It's small, but it's visible.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Great. Yeah, here you see the guy. You see how it holds on to the rock with its enormous claws. These claws are important when it feeds underwater, many feet below the surface, because otherwise it would float up. In order to hold on to the rock, it needs these feet to keep itself down while it feeds.
Yeah.
They have, it's quite amazing, both people and the marine iguanas have adapted to each other really well. We saw them now this last time, particularly in the village on where we stayed for a week. High tide in the harbor, they come up in the village on the sidewalks. They lie on the sidewalks like here, sunning themselves. And people are quite respectful there now. They've learned. People have become much better at conserving wildlife on the Galapagos. That doesn't mean that they are not endangered. These marine iguanas, they die by the thousands when productivity of the sea goes down, which happens every few years when there's an El Nino year. The Nino years means that the sea becomes less productive, warmer and less productive. Less productive means less algae, and less algae means the marine iguanas suffer. They die by the hundreds and thousands, and this skeleton shows after a few years, that's what you find on the beach. And then there's a small lizard, the Galapagos lava lizard. This is a female. They're beautiful little animals. They whip around and you you sometimes have to be careful not to step on them. They like to live close to the sea, which is interesting. Like this guy here, a male, you see he has a little crab in its mouth, which means a lizard lives close to the surf on the sea, where it goes after little crabs, which is, unusual. The little crab, if it is not eaten by the lizard, it grows up to be a large crab like this one, the Sally Lightfoot crab that lives all its life, all its adult life on land, lays its eggs in the sea where the larvae develop until they have, they're sort of a couple of millimeters large, and then they come. They let themselves be washed up on the rocks and grow into large crabs like this one here. This is a male. They are about, to give you an idea, they are as big as a hand, roughly. The herons go after them. There are several species of herons on Galapagos, like this yellow-crowned night heron, who lives at night, but not only as night, as you can see here. He goes after the crab. He may get the crab. In this case, he didn't. But if he doesn't, he may get a leg. Rip off a leg. The crab scuttles away with its remaining 7 legs and 2 claws, runs away and just has 1 leg less. And sometimes you see crabs that are 2 legs missing. If you were to follow the life of that crab over the next year or so, you would find that that leg actually grows back slowly. First it's small, but if with each molting, and all crabs molt, like all crustaceans molt, after each molting, this leg becomes bigger. We're going inland, higher up on the flanks of these volcanoes, and you have vistas like this, sometimes beautiful lakes or lagoons. Again, if you go down to that lagoon, you think it's beautiful water. Yeah, it's beautiful, but it is very salty. Inland, you find another iguana. This one is the land iguana, the so-called Galapagos land iguana, also endemic, a group of different species. They live inland on cactus pads. If there's fresher vegetation, when it rains grass, they eat that too. They are vegetarian, but not strictly vegetarian, particularly when they're small. They actually hunt insects the way lizards do. Yeah, you've seen that one. That's sort of a portrait. They're different from one island to the other. Several species have been described. Of course, you have a species of green iguana on the continent. It also exists, I think, in southern Florida. Different, about the same size. And around that same area, you may, particularly at night, see this centipede. Enormous thing, can be as long as a foot, about close to a foot long. Hunting insects, any sorts of insects. People in their houses like to have them around. I did anyway when I lived there, because they eat any insect that you have in the house. But you don't want to get them too close, or in your back, in your sleeping bag or something. Their bite is poisonous and painful. The scorpions are small, inoffensive, live on the beaches under rocks. Just to show you that there's some interesting invertebrate fauna as well, like this large grasshopper, about 3-4 inches long. Yeah, 3 inches long. Beautiful animal. And then the birds, of course, a hawk, not too different from our red-shouldered, red-tailed hawk, has large feet, which is much proportionately larger than other hawks, which one could imagine that it's adapted to hunting for iguanas. It goes after iguanas, particularly the smaller, particularly the females. When they nest, they are in danger of being killed by these hawks, of which there are not many. So each nesting season, these hawks may eat 1 or 2 iguanas, but not many. They go after these doves. The hawks do. The dove is also an endemic bird on Galapagos. Beautiful ground-living dove, closely related to our mourning dove that we have in our backyard here, eating our bird food. A mockingbird, again, similar to what we have here, our mockingbird, but quite different, very tame, and very interesting bird. Again, an animal that is similar to what we have on the continent, the vermilion flycatcher, but it's smaller and less colorful, less bright red. Another yellow guy on the left here that is similar to what we have also in North America here, the yellow warbler. The yellow warbler that you see here going after some food that I had left on my plate. They are so tame. Whenever you sit outside and eat something, in many places anyway, particularly in restaurants, because that's where they learned it, they come and look under your table, on your plate. Particularly also these guys here on the right there, that you see the little finch. They are very different from what we have in other parts of this continent or these 2 continents. These are Darwin's finches. It's a whole group of finches that live only on Galapagos. They have smaller beaks, larger beaks. There are 14 species. I hesitate a little bit because when I was on Galapagos a few years ago, it was still 13 species. Now they have split one species into 2, so it's 14 species, different sizes of beaks, different ways of feeding, going over bigger seeds, after bigger seeds, smaller seeds, parts of plants, insects, etc., specialized. Like this vegetarian tree finch, black-headed. And then there's one of them is, or 2 of them, I know one of them, this one, the woodpecker finch, is highly specialized. He hunts for insects in the wood like a woodpecker, but he doesn't peck like a woodpecker. He goes after the insects by using a little stick. And you see that on this video. Look at him working. In between, when you don't see the stick, he holds it. He holds it under his foot. It's up under his foot, and now he works on it. Under his foot, takes it again, and works. There is a hole there in the wood, and he tries to dig out an insect from within that twig. A very, very interesting and very unique bird. This was taken by a friend of ours who came with us. She kindly gave me this little video. Fabulous. Not many people have been able to actually record that. But it's maybe the 3rd or 4th time that I've seen it. You don't see it easily.
Very cool.
Plants, cacti. This is the world of cacti, of course. Dry, once every 3 years, maybe heavy rain, otherwise dry, 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 dry. Fresh lava, this is the endemic lava cactus that you wonder, you see it and it's incomprehensible. How can it live there? There's nothing but lava. Well, it does. It puts its roots down into the cracks, deep down, and produces stems every so often. Probably this group here, this particular plant, may be dozens or hundreds of years old. Another cactus, an opuntia cactus, that grows into trees, which people believe is an adaptation of getting away from the giant tortoises and the land iguanas. You saw the land iguana before eating one of those cactus pads. So they grow high up, form thick stems that protect them from being eaten by the iguanas and or the giant tortoises. The smaller cactus here, putting in the middle there, you see one that doesn't have this one here. It doesn't have a big stem yet. Down here, it has enormous spines, about 3 inches long spines. Yeah, and then the giant tortoises. These are the animals, of course, that have given the islands their name. Galapagos. Galapagos in Spanish is an old name for, well, it's like gallop. It's a bird. It's a saddle. Yeah, a horse saddle. Galapagos, and some of these giant tortoises have a carapace that has roughly a saddle shape. You'll see one, but the most of them and the biggest ones are just like a cupola. The little yellow warbler sitting on one of them gives you an idea how large they are. These 2 guys you cannot carry by yourself. You have to be 3 or 4 people in order to carry them. Give you an idea of the size. They live in the highlands mostly, and they wherever there are highlands, I should say. Some islands are simply flat and low and are very dry, and there are also tortoises in some of these islands. There are also tortoises who are highly adapted to the dryness. But in the bigger, higher islands, they like to live in the highlands, and islands live in the highlands, and feed on bushes and grasses, etc. They love to wallow in mud holes and in water pools. In the past, in the 18th and 19th century, tortoises were taken by the hundreds and thousands from the islands by both pirates, but later also by whalers who loved the meat and loved the fact that they don't die fast. So they took dozens, sometimes a few hundred of these tortoises on board and ate one a day, say. And after 50 days, they would still have fresh meat because the tortoises won't die. Of course, that reduced the number of tortoises massively. And one of the first projects of conservation, and that takes me a little bit to talk about conservation, was to try and save as many of these species of tortoises as possible. On 2 islands, they are extinct. On all islands, they have survived in reduced numbers. Like on this island here on Santa Cruz, there were a few thousand left from probably tens of thousands originally. They now can be bred at the facilities of the Darwin Station, and one has studied how to breed them, and it's very successful, and they can be then reintroduced to the wild. this shows one of those saddleback tortoises, or two of them. You see the front, how it's sort of built. It has a form like a saddle here. And that is an adaptation to very dry islands, because these tortoises, in order to find food, they have to reach up into the bushes or trees, which they can. They can reach up 4 or 5 feet above the ground. And that's where the form of this saddle is helpful. They are bred in the breeding facilities, which are now being managed by the national park. And hundreds of them, you see in the background here, you see the little ones, and it didn't put in a better picture, but you see the little ones here. They're being fed. They're maybe a year old. The eggs that are laid by the females are about tennis ball, the size of a tennis ball. And the young ones, when they hatch, can survive without food for a while, because they have an yolk sac in their belly. And they look around for food, and some of them, of course, don't survive, but enough survive. And here, in a protected situation, of course, most of them survive. And when they're 5 or 6 years old, they are reintroduced in the wild. A big problem that remains are introduced animals and plants. Animals, particularly for the tortoises, food competition from introduced goats and pigs, and in the past also donkeys, etc. But then also predators like rats and cats and dogs. Many of them have, in the meantime, been eradicated, or some of them have been eradicated on some of the islands. With rats, it's very difficult. So to protect these tortoises from rats, you have to keep them about 5 years under protected conditions like here, and then reintroduce them. Yeah, here you see a human, and here you see more humans. I wanted to talk a little bit about the people living on Galapagos and conservation. Like in many parts of the world, of course, you know, we humans have a hard time coexisting with wildlife. On Galapagos, that is particularly difficult because, as I said before, people never lived there before. So we are not wildlife, the other animals, so to speak, and we have no experience of living together. We did not have any co-evolution together. So we humans, if we want to preserve it, and it is extremely valuable, we want to preserve it, one has to work hard on it. Originally, when I came first 60 years ago, there were about 3,000 people on Galapagos. Now it's about 35,000 people living there, who live on about 3% of the land surface. And you have villages like this here, you know, and cars and, you know, village life, and a wonderful fish market where the very tame cormorants, and here you see also a lava gull, you know, who go after the fish, and the sea lions come in and want to have a piece as well. And people in the market are generally friendly, or try to chase them away, but don't harm the animals. The frigate birds come in, try to get something. In the background, you see the fishing vessels. Fishing is now you can only fish if you live there and have a license, and this is all very well, on the whole, well controlled. And external fishing, that is industrial fishing from outside, is not allowed. Very hard to enforce, because there are hundreds of Chinese and Costa Rican and North American and Japanese and whatnot vessels coming, trying to catch fish in the Galapagos Islands, because they are very productive. that is a battle. And the Ecuadorian government has taken it upon them to now protect a very large marine protected area, which is difficult, but at least they have declared it. Probably people break in and steal fish, but sometimes they're caught with the help of controls from airplanes and satellites. One hopes to control it better. Tourism is the big business, and one can, of course, discuss tourism, whether that's good or bad. On the whole, it is good because it provides incentive and a reason for the country of Ecuador and the local people to actually do something about conservation. Now, boats, big or small, these are local little boats, taxis, water taxis, and it's interesting. You go into the villages and this is in a church, an altar in a church, and it struck me how now, in contrast to only a couple of decades ago, maybe, people have really taken on, conservation, and they understand better now, what the value of these and the beauty of these animals are. You see here this altar with an altar, a Catholic altar, with frigate birds and blue-footed boobies, and here's another in the church, a beautiful painting of marine iguanas and sea lions and boobies and flamingos, whales in the background, and the Galapagos landscape. So on the whole, after decades of work there of the Charles Darwin Foundation and the National Park and other organizations, I would say conservation is in better shape, by far not perfect, but better shape and more hopeful shape than it used to be. And tourism plays a big role here, of course, because tourists go there not mainly to go swimming or something. They go to see animals and plants, to see the special things that you can see on Galapagos. Tourists like these. On the left, I put that in because it shows how people lived on Galapagos when they settled first. This little hut is probably about 100 years old, and poor people from the continent came to the islands to settle there and built their little huts and tried to make a living. They were environmentally not positive. Of course, these people didn't care about the environment. They wanted to make a living. And it was tourism then. You see a group of tourists, this was one of our groups, who now create an incentive for people to conserve those things that are the big attraction on Galapagos. One 4:11. It's not all the time. Okay, thank you. Diane just told me it's 4:11, which is good.
You're doing great.
What I wanted to say, special attraction tourism for the people. You saw those pictures of the tortoises on in the wallowing thing and on the meadows and in the highlands. Those tortoises were only 50 years ago, people just ate them, killed them. And then a few years later, when they started to breed cattle up there, they were a nuisance because the tortoises broke into they destroyed the fences, etc., etc. Well, now many of those farmers up there in the highlands, and this is outside of the national park, these farmers, they understand that tourists pay to see the tortoises. So they charge a $10 entrance fee to see and photograph the tortoises on their farm. They open little cafes, little restaurants. Maybe you can even sleep up there now. they have a little bedroom, etc. So tourism becomes a business, and it is nature-oriented tourism on Galapagos, which was actually the way it was intended. The problem was, decades ago, that one had to think about, what about tourism? Huge hotels everywhere, and I don't know, motorbike roads up the volcanoes and everything. That would, of course, be a problem. It would destroy things. But this sort of tourism, which is relatively benign, there's a lot of problems with it too. But the positive sides are relatively more significant than the negative sides. Oh yeah, and at the end, this is a surprising picture, I'm sure, just to talk about conservation a little bit more. The Darwin Foundation now is faced, the conservation community in general, faced with problems of introduced species, of plants and animals that have been brought previously and have, like rats or dogs or cattle or goats, etc. Some of them, like goats, you can get rid of them. It's very expensive, very difficult to get rid of them, but you can. There are others, like this fly, where it is more difficult. Now, what about this fly? This fly, as you can see, it's practically like a housefly, like people get annoyed with when they come into our houses. But it's a very different fly, actually. It looks like our housefly. It's a parasitic fly that lives when it is an adult like this here on flowers, etc. But then when birds lay their eggs in nests, this fly lays its eggs into the nest as well. The fly has a capability of timing its egg laying with the small bird, like those finches. Like when the finches lay their eggs, the fly lays its eggs into the nest. And when the little bird hatches, the larvae of the fly hatch as well and crawl up into the nest, and they eat the little birds. And they kill them by, in great percentages. This became noticeable over the last 20 years or so. The numbers of small birds, finches, and also you remember the vermilion flycatcher, numbers of them shrank, and one find out this fly is the main factor. So what do you do about it? Very hard, very hard. You have to study. That's what the Darwin Foundation now does. They study what can you do in order to limit the impact of these flies so that they don't destroy the bird fauna of Galapagos. They found out that in Latin America, this fly is common. I mean, not common, but it's distributed all over many places in the Caribbean and Central America and South America. But it seems that on the continent, they don't have such a negative impact on the birds who live there. So how is that possible? So this was a big study. It's a study that is not done only on Galapagos. It has to be done in Latin America, in laboratories elsewhere in the world, etc. And it has to be done by looking at the birds up in the trees, look in their nests, and try out methods like, putting nicotinoids into the nest in order to kill the flies in the nest. But you can't reach every nest on Galapagos to protect, so you have to find another way. And they studied what is happening on the continent. They found that the fly itself is limited in its number by another insect. This is a Darwin Foundation scientists looking at these flies under her microscope. Another insect they found that preys on the flies, a little wasp. This is a wasp. It looks big on this picture, but it is tiny. It's about a millimeter, less than a millimeter long, tiny, tiny little thing. And it is specialized in laying its eggs into the pupa of the fly, thereby killing the fly. It doesn't exterminate the fly, but it reduces its number. Therefore, on the continent, the fly does not exterminate all birds. So that's where they are now. Last time we were there and we talked to people this last winter, they were at that stage trying out the effect of these wasps on the fly and making sure that the wasp does not attack other insects on Galapagos, but is specifically has a specific effect on the fly. That's the challenge. And the other general challenge, of course, is to make sure that there are not more introductions, that we limit the introductions of animals and plants and seeds, etc. Like on all islands, introductions and invasive species are the big problem. So on Galapagos and on the continent, on the airports, you have these what they call agente de bioseguridad, so biosecurity agents who control what you bring in. Okay, and they make at least a big effort to make sure that anything that comes to Galapagos in terms of introduced food, etc., does not contain anything that could settle on Galapagos and cause problems. So yeah, last picture, nice beach. I can tell you how these beaches are formed, but maybe you're getting tired. It's interesting. If you think we all walk on beaches, in many beaches around the world. They are generally whitish, sometimes are brown on black. On Galapagos, they're black, sometimes are brown because it's volcanic. Now, what does white beach come from?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, in many places, particularly, I mean, say our Atlantic beaches here, they're probably, most of them are quartz. Quartz that has been, comes from rocks that has been, beaten up in the rivers and is washed down and then up on the beaches. So it's quartz, granite, that sort of old, very old volcanic products, very old, but then the white beaches on Galapagos are different. They are not quartz. They are made of carbonate, and so different. They come from different sources. They are not. They're calcium carbonate. Their origin can be from their little shells, tiny shells that are leftovers from tiny animals or microbes, or much of it, most probably, is what fish produce who live on reefs of I'm getting tired. On what's a reef?
Coral reefs?
On coral reefs, thank you. We live on coral reefs. They bite little pieces off the coral reef and digest what they bite off. But they don't digest the calcium carbonate part. They poop that out. And that becomes then sand. So probably the Galapagos sand is mainly fish poop, if you wish. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And beaches are very interesting places if you look closely. A lot of animals living in them, etc. So anyway, on that note, I've
I think there's one more slide.
one more slide. Ah, yes, a sleeping tortoise.
Oh, Peter, this was excellent.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording actually right now, but Peter, just extraordinary adventure you just took us on.
And can you stop spotlighting or whatever so that?
Yeah, well,